Let's bring in Charles Marino, who served as an advisor to the Department of Homeland Security under President Obama. Chuck, we know that states like Arizona, Texas, and Florida have been sending immigrants to sanctuary cities, but the non-governmental agencies and charities have been doing it for a long time. How many NGOs are at the southern border, and how does the federal government rely on these groups?
Well, I think it's almost impossible to track. We know that there's probably about 50 along the southwest border, and that's where they're primarily contained. So the problem here is that the NGOs, Adrienne, have taken over as the official travel agency of the Department of Homeland Security. Let's go back in time. We know the Department of Homeland Security got a lot of flack for the midnight flights that they were running through Immigration and Customs Enforcement to states like New York, and they got out of that business based on the scrutiny. So now they've turned it over to the NGOs, not just to coordinate the shelter and the food, but also the travel. Ultimately, we're going to see billions of dollars here of taxpayer money go to waste through fraud and abuse because there's no oversight through FEMA. But this is what happens when you place yourself in crisis. You end up with this downward spiral of poor decision making, and the U.S. government's typical response, as we all know, is to throw a lot of money from the taxpayers up in the air and see what happens.
Well, and I think that's why there are some Americans in our country who are frustrated by what's happening at the border. Where is the oversight? How much money is being exchanged? And then the politicization of it, blaming one governor or another when this has been a classic example of what's happened at the border for, again, years. Should the NGOs stop sending people to sanctuary cities? Should the federal government stop contracting with them in order to really face this problem head on? Or would that just make things worse?
Well, I think it would make things worse. You know, the problem is we're not fighting this at a third or fourth country away from the United States. We don't have anything like Remain in Mexico, which was pulled by the administration. We are now dealing with this problem, and it's already inside of our country. And the NGOs, let's face it, are going to help whoever they encounter, and that includes those that are gotaways, where there's no records of them with CBP at all. But they're going to put them on planes, they're going to send them around the country, they're going to send them primarily to sanctuary cities because of the protections that sanctuary cities offer to migrants. But if you talk to somebody like Mayor Adams in New York City, I think it's a safe bet to say that when you ask him who's footing the bill for all this, he's going to tell you it's the taxpayers of New York City, right, and not these NGOs. So where is this money going?
You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking most of it's going just to the bus ride, because you see these NGOs publicly say that they're helping out compassionately. I mean, Catholic charities are doing so much hard work. They're giving them clothes on their back. They're giving their kids toys to play with while they've gone through a hellish journey from whatever country to the United States. But a lot of times you hear, oh, these immigrants want to go to this city because they have friends and family to host them there. But obviously, we're seeing tons of people homeless now on the streets, whether it's El Paso, Texas, or here in Chicago, sleeping at the police station because they have nowhere to go. So are these NGOs just taking all that cash and only spending it on a bus ticket?
Well, that's what Congress is interested in now. You know, you've got the DHS Inspector General that did a cursory investigation of the initial funds that were going to the NGOs. And the news was not good, Adrienne. There was no accountability. There was no record keeping. They couldn't articulate how many migrants they were helping, and specifically how many rooms were being reserved for them, and how much food was being supplied, and what type of travel accommodations were being made. You know, without record keeping, these grants are going to go to waste, and we're going to see a lot of fraud, unfortunately. But, you know, look, this is poor decisions by this administration, as I've said many times before with you. I stick with that, whether it's on purpose or it's through incompetence. It's now everyone's problem, and this is being laid at the feet of every single city in the United States who are not going to have the resources to deal with this.
Yeah, and again, we're seeing it north, south, east, and west. Charles Marino, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, an important story.
No accountability means no responsibility.
And
Nobody's taking
taxpayers should
responsibility.
know.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.